Today we have Persona 4 versus Final Fantasy X. The two most popular JRPGs on the PlayStation 2. But also, any version. If you didn't play the original versions, if you play the remasters, Final Fantasy X has been remastered and ported to every console in existence after the PS2. I'm not kidding. And then there's Persona 4, which is the golden version on the Vita, and that very same version got a Steam port, and then a remaster on Switch and PS4, it's everywhere. You have no excuse, and two extremely super freaking popular games. Everybody knows them, and I think at this point almost everybody has played them, right? So, start poll! Okay, so Jordan says Persona 5 may be the one that the mainstream knows, but 4 elevated Persona to that platform. Endless respect to Final Fantasy X and its character switching, CTB and linear style, but man, Persona 4 is just the one. You're voting right? Okay, so Somnium Work says Persona 4 was more about village life compared to the others. Okay. As a result, both protagonists and antagonists had to come closer together. Oh, interesting. So you still consider it is the best Persona installment. Oh, there you go. Sylvester says, even though I love Persona 4 as well, Final Fantasy X was the first huge JRPG on PS2. It amazed me with its graphics, and I personally loved all the characters as well. Seeing all those Aeon's new designs, I loved everything in it. Abawa Q says, this is an extremely tough one for me, but it's Final Fantasy X for me. I think that 10 had a better mood, emotional story. It also generally sits in the spot of the last great Final Fantasy. Well, I think 12 is a fantastic Final Fantasy, but it doesn't really feel like a Final Fantasy. So okay, I'll respect that. Tetramaster says Final Fantasy X because emotional story, great side bosses, minigames, best battle system ever, and awesome laughing scenes. Well, best battle system ever? Wow, okay. I'll respect that opinion. Donsk says I voted Persona 4. I am a sucker for Final Fantasy games, but Persona 4 Golden Steam Edition, goddamn, all the extra content, it was simply amazing. Prioritizing content over everything else, okay. Make Foxhound great again, says. There's no objective right or wrong with this, but I feel Final Fantasy X just has a much more lively world that pulls you in, and despite the main character being arguably annoying, the world and story was great. Okay. Horion says, I really like Final Fantasy X, but it was Persona 4 for me, with deeper character development and a more engaging story. Okay. Probably mispronouncing your name, but Barb says, I think Persona 4 Golden is good, but the fact that the game had to go through multiple versions before becoming good will always be a problem for me. I don't like Atlus doing this still to this day, so Final Fantasy X wins for me. Okay, I respect that. And yeah, you know how I feel about Atlus nowadays, so I feel the same way actually. So there you go. Baja K says it's Final Fantasy X for me because while both are masterpieces, Persona 4 has the usual Persona story pacing problem, while Final Fantasy X has a very heartwarming and crushing beauty of a well-told story and lovable cast. Interesting. Mystery Kid says Persona 4 Golden was different because of the mystery, detective, whodunit aspect of the story, which was unique, which makes the final boss more interesting than the final boss in Final Fantasy X. Okay, so you prefer Persona 4 just because of the final boss? Last Dragoon says, although I like Persona 4, I have to choose Final Fantasy X. It has such a sad, but at the same time a beautiful story. I also love the battle system, and music from Final Fantasy X is so iconic, especially to Samarkand. Okay. Kevin says Persona 4 on the surface was basically a Scooby-Doo plot, but there were Scooby-Doo plot. Somnium Work says Final Fantasy X was really good, but it wasn't exactly groundbreaking in terms of plot. Lavos, Sin, tries to destroy the world. It was a familiar storyline, but the way the story was presented was great. Okay, but you're still voting for Persona 4, right? Stefan keeps defending Final Fantasy X, saying it's like those movies that you saw on TV when you were a kid, full of heart, magic, and feel from the 2000s era that Hollywood doesn't make anymore. Persona 4 is like those indie movies from then and today. Well, well, a lot of people will say that's the magic of Persona 4, right? The poll is over, everybody. We got 100 votes, and Persona 4 won with 51%, whereas Final Fantasy X lost with 49%. Holy Jesus, that was almost a tie. I'm not the biggest fan of both games, to be honest. You probably already know how I feel about both. They're great games, and I did like them a lot, but I don't love them passionately as much as a lot of fans do. But I gotta side with Persona 4 just because it's the more interesting game to me personally. It's got more gameplay mechanics, more engaging, combat system. I'm a sucker for SMT combat. You guys know that SMT is one of my favorite combat systems of all time. And I really like the demon system, in this case Persona, the fusion, summoning things and whatever, I like that a lot. Whereas Final Fantasy X had a great battle system. If you played the Final Fantasy games from before, which had an attack waiting bar, that the enemy was not going to wait for you, and they got rid of that in Final Fantasy X, it gives you enough time, to think of your actions and, come up with a better strategy without having the pressure, of the previous Final Fantasy games. I like that, but still, you can switch characters mid-battle. That was also badass. So for its time, it was a great battle system, but nowadays it's nothing special. It's just your average system. And yes, maybe you could say the same about the Shin Megami Tensei battle mechanics. It's been done before, but it's been done before mostly by Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. And I still find it more engaging. It's just a matter of personal taste, but I think it's just more dynamic and a little bit more complex and deeper than the one in Final Fantasy X. And the gameplay mechanics, you got this high school simulator that a lot of people don't like. I don't like it either. But the life simulator offers more, way more gameplay mechanics. And it's just way more. There's more to do, more to appreciate, and more variety than in Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X is a simple game, and that's what makes it great. I know that, but Persona 4 is just, there's more to do. And the story, I think I prefer the one in Persona 4, but I can't make a very compelling argument on both stories because they were groundbreaking. Final Fantasy X had this plot twist, I know that, and this sad ending, and Persona 4 had this really messed up darkness to it, but I think I prefer other Final Fantasy stories and other Persona stories over the one in these two games. And, we don't want to get into the characters because I'm just not a fan of the cast on either game. I do like some characters, Final Fantasy X, I like Lulu and Auron. They're awesome, but everybody else is just, I don't care or I don't like. And Persona 4 is kind of the same. Like, I like Yukiko and maybe Naoto after the plot twist, but everything else is just like Kanji was funny, and that's it. Chie kind of grew on me. I'm just not the biggest fan of either cast. It's a good cast of characters on both, but yeah, exactly. So what's left? The graphics, well, they're okay. I prefer the stylized graphics of Persona over the a little bit more realistic graphics of Final Fantasy X, which weren't exactly realistic back then, but that's what they were aiming for back then. I prefer the graphics in Persona 4. And finally, the music. I think Final Fantasy X has great bangers, but Persona 4, the soundtrack is just incredible, man. I love Nobuo Uematsu, and I'm a bigger Nobuo Uematsu fan than Shoji Meguro, but Persona 4, the soundtrack is just untouchable. It's one of the best soundtracks of all time. Same with Persona 3 and 5, especially 5, but I just freaking love the music in Persona 4. And that's it. So, to me, Final Fantasy X loses because I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's not one of my favorite Final Fantasy games of all time. And Persona 4 isn't my favorite Persona game, but it's a great game, and I really, 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 really enjoyed it. Way more so than Final Fantasy X. That's my argument. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Thank you for voting.